Okay. On the right, is that in? Okay, you can see everything, or is there a part of the screen blocked out? Here.
That's right.
Oh, there we go. Okay, super. Okay, so this talk will be more about building a community, because the community that I built for 5 years is in pause, and I would like to listen and get feedback from the audience and all of you in order to think for a future direction for where to take this community. So this is a story about asteroid science intersections with in-space mine engineering. And I want to look at how this community was built from the ground up mostly, and from the top down a little bit. And so it began, I would say, actually quite early than what you might imagine. There was a period of time in the deep impact spacecraft development where this particular comet, not asteroid, comet was impacted. And what struck me was there was a press conference right after that impact where there was an Australian journalist talking to the deep impact mission manager. And this impact took place on July 4th, which is an Independence holiday in the United States. And so this particular hitting of a small planetary body was quite shocking, I would say, to many European scientists and non-Americans. And so this journalist asked, you are shooting a comet on America's 4th of July holiday. Can you say something to that point? And the mission manager did not say something to that point, talked about, oh, well, it's good science. And what this mission manager missed is that there was a philosophical problem with hitting a small planetary object in this way. And so that struck me as a lost opportunity, and we need to pay a little more attention to how the community feels when you're manipulating small planetary objects. And so what happened since that period of time of deep impact is that more asteroids were discovered. And well, we still have few Jupiter family comets, but we have millions of asteroids. And so the perception now with space mining is that asteroid mining provides an opportunity with many bodies in which to mine. Now, the water-rich bodies are fewer in number, but they're more than the moon. And so I think this philosophical shift is something worthwhile to highlight in the asteroid mining marketing, let's say, or talking to the community. Okay, so that was a shift in abundance. Now let's talk about the community of the scientists themselves. So when deep space industries and planetary resources were formed, if you were inside of the planetary research community, there was a perception that this is ridiculous. How can you form a company with this goal? Who's doing the research? Who decides which is the right asteroid? How do you mine that material and have it be of benefit to the community? And so I was in that community and I heard these words, ridiculous. Well, after these two companies were formed, more companies were formed. And now instead of this is ridiculous, now you have planetary science saying, are they serious? And I listened to this and I could sense a shift in perception and acceptance about these companies. Now, not completely accepting, but yet there was definitely a shift in how the planetary research community viewed these space companies. Okay, so in 2014, I met Deep Space Industries, and I was at the asteroid, the ASIME meeting in Helsinki, and I met the DSI manager at that time, and we spoke for hours after that meeting. And I got the idea that maybe it's time to start bringing together the researchers and the companies, because I started advising deep space industries. And one of the things that was immediately obvious is that they were strapped for resources for paying planetary scientists. And so I was mostly giving my time, and that's a problem, right? Because we all have expertise. So starting in 2015, I started talking to the community about the way to bring these two communities together. And so this is my graphic that shows the circles that I went in that year, in particular, the second half of 2015. So one of the things about being a soft money researcher is that you have some flexibility, and I tend to support myself with lots of affiliations. Now it's a little bit less now. I dropped my university affiliation, but PSI is a tremendous resource with 100 planetary scientists. And so in the summer of 2015, I used the retreat, the yearly retreat, in order to engage my colleagues with a series of questions. I had 10 questions. Now, these were hypothetical questions because as a deep space industries advisor, I couldn't actually talk about what they talked about. So I proposed to PSI, well, if you were in a mining company, here are some questions that you might have. And so because there's a large overlap in the scientific interests of the companies and the researchers, I put together these questions. And so the questions were, for example, about the interior structure. Is the dusty regolith all the way through the body, as Dan Britt says? And I asked them very detailed questions about the structure of the interiors of those bodies. And then also about the cohesiveness, and what about its evolutionary history, and how do these dust particles versus pebbles, how do they stay together? And so the idea during that 15-minute talk was that I would try to get some answers that I could bring back to deep space industries, but the questions were so detailed that Mark Sykes, the CEO, said, Amara, we really need a workshop in order to address each of these questions. I'm sorry, do you see a dimming of my screen? Okay, just a second. I am going to, yeah, I need a bright screen. Okay, let's get back to full. There we go. And so that was the beginning of the ASIME workshop, is with Mark Sykes' suggestion that we really need a dedicated community. So now who is going to fund such a workshop? So, well, we have many asteroid scientists in the world. The communities are quite different. Let's say there's 800 asteroid scientists in the world. And let's say there are a few, 3 at this time, asteroid mining companies. So how would you go about funding such a workshop? And how would you go about engaging these 800 asteroid scientists in the world? And so then from that summer meeting in 2015, there was a September EPSC meeting where I asked my colleagues at the poster session, would you be interested in attending the meeting? And there was a bit of a mix. Are they serious? Yes, they're serious. Well, yes, I think I would be interested to attend. And then I began to attend Europlanet side discussions. Well, they have funding for such kinds of workshops. Maybe they can fund this kind of meeting. But the thing is about Europlanet workshops is nobody actually pays the person putting the workshop together. They pay the facilities, they pay some stipends to the scientists attending, but the person doing the work to put it together is unfunded. And so, well, this is where I have a benefit of being a soft money researcher. I can start going out in the community and find who can actually fund this. And so I have this arrow to DSI because this period of time in the fall of 2015 was when I met the Luxembourg Ministry of the Economy because they were beginning their own business arrangements in Luxembourg. And I asked for a meeting with them. And Daniel Faber, who was a CEO at that time, he offered this introduction and he offered to teach me about one-page unsolicited proposals. And so that was what I presented to the Luxembourg Ministry of the Economy, and it was accepted because they also have their own agenda for bringing the researchers and the companies together. And so 1 year later, this meeting took place, and it was built around what I had hypothetically put together a year before, which is questions from the asteroid miners. If you were a company strapped resources for scientific expertise, what questions do you need to have answered in order to build your space missions? And so we separated the questions to the scientists in terms of surrounding asteroid, on the surface of the asteroid, and beneath the asteroid. And then the community really did a fantastic job. This is our community. It was probably the most inspiring group of people I've been around ever. It was super fun. And this was in Luxembourg, in the center of the oldest part of the city, in an old abbey, by the way. And so we have a white paper that came out of that. And this white paper is intended to be a survey of the field with questions and answers to those questions from the asteroid miners. And so, well, then around 2017, more companies jumped into the arena, and we could see that the community was growing. So now the scientists want to get involved, and hopefully there's even industry money to pay the time of these scientists. Well, this is the problem with asteroid mining. You have to find the asteroid, and you have to explore which are the right asteroids to go to. And so with Luxembourg involved, the survey provided the first step, and then a roadmap of which were the key resources to go after. And then the first step might be, well, what are the scientific questions that we want to answer? So 2018 was when Luxembourg started developing its own roadmap of what are the key resources. And then from 2016, we have science knowledge gaps. That's what this SKG stands for. And with those science knowledge gaps, Luxembourg proposed to have an ASIME meeting for a few times to address a focus of each of those science knowledge gaps. So in 2018 was the next ASIME meeting, which was about the composition of asteroids. There was a clear interest in C-type and water-rich asteroids, and so that was a focus of that meeting. And there was also a white paper of those composition questions. So this approach is very successful, a kind of a bottom-up approach to survey the asteroid mining field with the scientists together and then come up with science knowledge gaps. Okay, so from the company's side, there was a problem in that they have to survive from the inception of their company and keep their company running while they're developing a space mission to go to the asteroids. So this is what's the gap, the business model gap. You have to somehow keep your company alive, you know, for the far future, which could be 20 years ahead. Now, I like to think 10 years ahead, but many people think 20 years ahead. So there's two kinds of business models that the two largest companies provided for us. Deep Space Industries eventually arrived at a business model of serving the industry with water thrusters. And so they developed water thrusters that they had a queue of customers lined up for, but they could not scale up their company properly and quickly to meet that customer demand. And the CEO also shifted to someone who was more interested in selling the company than in proceeding with asteroid mining. So Deep Space Industries was acquired not too long after 2018. Now, the other asteroid mining company, which is Planetary Resources, down here is the companies. So Planetary Resources has a different model, which is to teach the community about asteroid mining. So they were very focused on video explanations and descriptions and explaining why we need to go to asteroids. And they were quite management heavy, and their burn rate in the company was very fast. And they could not sustain themselves because they did not have a service to sell to sustain themselves. So later in 2018, this happened. We lost the two largest ones. Deep Space Industries was acquired by Bradford Space, which, by the way, acquired their queue of customers for water thrusters. So it's not like we lost that capacity. Those are proceeding. And then Planetary Resources was acquired by Consensus, which is a blockchain company, which somewhat makes sense, but that's another topic of another conversation. Meanwhile, Luxembourg seemed to have settled on lunar space mining. And so they engaged the lunar space miners because to them it was less risk. They lost money actually in the asteroid mining endeavor, and they could engage and move forward the space resource utilization much better with lunar resources. So this is what happened in 2019. 2020 was supposed to be the next ASIME. Well, as you know, it didn't happen. We thought that 2020 would be the next science knowledge gap, which would be Regulus, because it was in several science knowledge gap questions, asteroid Regulus, asteroid Regulus. We really wanted to have a meeting focused on asteroid Regulus, but there was not interest in Luxembourg to have that. They wanted to engage asteroid miners, but not to have a dedicated meeting on that topic. So what about the future of the ASIME community? Well, I had to shift my own funding to be a little more business oriented because I missed deadlines for my 3 affiliations. You know, when you have to take care of teaching a kid at home because of the danger of COVID, I had to let go some proposals that were keeping me alive. And so I had my own funding to take care of, and I shifted a little bit. And now I'm thinking about, well, what to do with the asteroid mining ASIME community. And I think it needs a new home because last August, there was this very provocative discussion by Kevin Cannon, who was at previous ASIME meeting, describing that mining near-Earth asteroids makes little sense. And he has 5 points why it makes little sense. And I disagree with almost all of them. And I would like to debate Kevin Cannon sometime. He says that there's nothing found on near-Earth asteroids that you can't find on the moon. It takes forever to get to and from near-Earth asteroids. Okay, a little of that is spent mining. So there are valid discussions, but we can address each of those. Mining small asteroids is an operational nightmare, he says. There's very little mass in the accessible near-Earth objects. Well, okay, we know how to address these points, and that the moon is a better stepping stone to space resource utilization. Well, I don't think that these are enough to let the asteroid mining community go. I think that there's a real niche that we need to preserve. And a philosophical argument about the abundance of asteroids, I think, trumps lunar mining in that we have one moon, but millions of asteroids. And so as there's competition on the moon, and as there is development in capacity of mining skills, we need to move forward the asteroid mining too, because it is hard to find those right asteroids, but we're much better now than we were, let's say, 5 years ago at these skill sets. So my conclusion is that this community is valuable, built from the bottom up and from the top down. It's the science knowledge gaps provided the first community developed scientific roadmap supporting asteroid mining. I think that is ASIME's key service and value to the world. It's a very unique and useful niche. And so I am now finding am talking now, like I did in 2015, is there a new home for ASIME? And there's even some think tanks that are interested in carrying forward the next ASIME meeting. So I would really like your feedback about this, because I don't think we need to let ASIME go. And there's a number of issues about the space resource utilization field and the entrepreneurial space in general, which I think is getting forgotten, about how to include community in a better way, more gender balanced, more open access shared articles, more listening between the scientists and the industry, more ways of communicating between these different sectors. And so this was 6 years ago that I put this list together, and I see that it still is a valid set of goals to have, and I think they can be a baseline for the ASIME community as well. So, oops, sorry. So that's it for the end of my talks. Let me. I'm going to put up that last slide just so I can take questions. There. Okay. So, do you have questions?
I see there's not yet a question from the audience, but there's one from me, and of course later on there will be a panel discussion with the other speakers. There will be a lot of questions among you guys, and my question is, what was the what was the next ASIME? I remember I asked you through email about 2 years ago. You said
Yeah.
it's on the way, but still you have the plan to hold one.
So I have to go back to find a new funder and a new home, because I understand Luxembourg's interest in lunar mining. It's less risky for them, and they have a huge community that they've built. And so in 2020, they when the pandemic hit, they wanted to include a smaller ASIME inside of their Space Resources Week. That was the idea. It would be in February, I think, of 2021, and then they did not include it. They included some asteroid scientists, and there were definitely discussions with the really valuable Hayabusa 2 results that were coming back, and the OSIRIS-REx results. We definitely have new science and new points of discussion, and either we need to have a focus meeting on regolith to bring out these mission results that we have now, or go back to a survey to see, are there new science knowledge gaps? What are the points to focus on? So first of all, I have to find a new home for ASIME. Is it Luxembourg? I think no, but who can support this community to fund the researchers? So what we need, so here's what was successful about ASIME is that they provided basically a free meeting, and scientists who attended didn't have to pay registration fees. That was important because scientists are often strapped for funds themselves. And then some portion of them were offered stipends to attend. And then the people who were leading the meetings were also offered key financial support. So those scientists have to be supported. And then I think the industry members themselves also need to be supported. In the previous two ASIMEs, they weren't. And I think that was a mistake. So they're also strapped for cash. They also have to pay money to travel long distance to attend. Now, maybe there would be a hybrid meeting where it would be online and cheaper. And that's worthwhile to consider too. So I think these questions have to be answered. But first, I want to find an interested participant, and then how to fund it, and to meet these funding goals to fund both the scientists and the industry members. And so I would like to open my email to people to write me and give me feedback about this. And this year it's my plan to find a home to see if we can support this community and not forget about it. So that's where we're at. It's very vague, I know, but but Luxembourg hasn't come forward with the next ASIME, and I don't think it's going to happen. So that's where we're at.
Thank you for your answer.